Oxidative rancidity. Now, I'll go through this very fast. We will post this up on the website because you'll say, oh, wow, I want to read about this. Oxidative rancidity is associated with degradation by oxygen in the air via a free radical process. The double bonds of an unsaturated fatty acid can undergo cleavage, releasing volatile aldehydes and ketones. This process can be suppressed by the exclusion of oxygen, which you talked about by putting water on your oil, or by the addition of antioxidants. The antioxidant, and really there is only one antioxidant that protects your oil, is vitamin E. Okay? Vitamin E protects oils. It's present in oils. So all seed oils, whatever it is, will start off with vitamin E. Okay? Vitamin E will take roughly 1 week to absorb the oxidative molecules from the air, heat and light affecting the oil. So in other words, 1 week after you've got your oil, okay, if the air and the light and the heat aren't excluded, it will be rancid. Okay? As soon as your vitamin E takes up those molecules, when the vitamin E is fully saturated, the oil then goes rancid. Okay, so you've used up the protection device. So unless you add more E. But E is not alpha tocopherol. Okay? Again, I searched through all sorts of vitamin E's and they are all rancid before they even go in a capsule. Okay? You'll never get those to muscle test. They don't muscle test. And it's also because they use alpha tocopherol, because they say, like the vitamin C, that's vitamin E. That's the active part. It's not. Vitamin E is 4 tocopherols, maybe even 5, and 4 tocotrienols. Okay, different molecules which all have different roles in the vitamin E. There is only one source which is decent of vitamin E, as you'll see in a minute. Now, if we have a look here, here's our puffer. That means a polyunsaturated fatty acid. Okay, here. And here's our free radical comes along in the presence of oxygen, and out goes the radical part there and leaves its electron on the puffer, or the fatty acid. So the fatty acid is now, it's been oxidized, so it's a free radical. This is protected by tocopherol, we call it, TOC. Right? Now, tocopherol will take the free radical, the extra electron, and itself becomes a free radical. Okay? And then that will be recycled back here, or reduced, so it can take another one. Okay? So you recycle the vitamin E, providing you've got somebody else who will take it. Okay, so I give you the hot potato and you hand it on, okay? And then you're all right again, aren't you? But she isn't. She's got to hand it on to somebody else, right? Now, the person who takes this on, in the membrane, in the fat, is vitamin E. But underneath in the mitochondria, the cytoplasm here, is the person who takes it on next is vitamin C. Okay? Vitamin C takes the electron and says, that's all right. So it becomes oxidized, and then it goes down and hands it on, in this case, to glutathione. Now, glutathione itself can be recycled by a substance called alpha-lipoic acid. So now you begin to say, vitamin E, vitamin C, and alpha-lipoic acid are rather important. Now, this enzyme that changes the reduced form back into the oxidized form into the reduced form is called glutathione peroxidase, and that is a selenium-dependent enzyme. Okay? So there's our selenium connection. So you've got vitamin E, vitamin C, alpha-lipoic acid, which can be stimulated in different ways, and selenium. Richer source of selenium, what is it? Watercress. What do we put in our oils? Watercress. We steep them all in watercress. So you get the selenium naturally from the watercress in the oils. So that helps you to protect. That's why you should always have adequate amounts of selenium and vitamin C. Where do you get your vitamin C from? From your cold potatoes, not your hot potato. Okay, so your potato juice and your lemons and so on. So this oxidized oil here then goes into your membranes and stiffens you right up. Okay, and that's what most people have. In other words, they've got rancid oils in them. Now, the final source, by 4 times the amount than anything else of E complex, in other words, all those 4 tocotrienols and tocopherols, is wheat germ oil. So we're back to the wheat germ. Okay? When do you get wheat germ from? Wholemeal flour. But do you get it once it's been ground into flour? No. 100 years ago, every village, every place had its own mill. So in time, every one of you will get a mill. Okay? You can buy big ones, small ones. You can buy attachments to your Kenwoods now. You can buy Vita mixes. Fantastic. 10 seconds and you've got your flour. 1 kilo of flour in 10 seconds. Have you got the flour one? The dry one there? 10 seconds. Fantastic. Absolutely amazing. Kenwood are now doing the similar attachment on there. I've had patients look up, and there's ham ones that you can buy now as well. If you don't want to go into expensive ones, there's German ones and all sorts of ones coming out now. Because, and if you want to know where to get the flour, you get it from Dove's Farm. You know Dove's Farm? Yeah, Dove's will do you 25 kilo sacks. Sounds enormous, but if you run through about half a kilo, you need just under half a kilo per loaf. So that's only going to give you 50 loaves, let's say, from a 25 kilo sack. And you get a 25 kilo sack for about £20. So it's less than £1 a kilo. Okay? It's organic and lovely. Okay, when you've tasted that bread, you will never eat anything else. We find the Jamie Oliver recipe the easiest and the best. And how much kneading do you do, Joe? 8 minutes. I do 5 because I've got bigger hands. What? You could put it in bread oven, yeah, but you really should put the love in there. Yeah. So don't be in a bad, cross mood when you do it. I would say. But yes, you could put it in a bread machine. Okay.
And do you feel really that the rats can eat those?
Yes. I haven't found a red who has weakened to wheat. I found
that particular type of
yes,
wheat.
yes. I haven't found. If you test whole wheat, if you test them with flour, they all weaken. Okay. Because it's rancid. It's the rancid oils that the red doesn't like. What does the red person get? Heart disease, cardiovascular disease. No wonder, because they're oxidizing. No wonder they got oxidized arteries and things. You get them off that onto their own proper wheat, and they'll be a different person altogether. Okay? But you've got to get it fresh. The only way you can get fresh wheat germ oil, we found, is to get it, from us, and to look after it. You put it in the fridge. Okay, and you put water on the top. Okay, so you put a couple of drops of water. We do it in 100 mils. Don't have more than that, and because once you take it more, you're going to risk of oxidation. And it's got a pipette. So the pipette goes through the water. Okay, and you take your oil out. Okay, now the most I've had with anybody at the moment is 50 drops. Okay, so sometimes it's only 10 drops. I can't tell you how much vitamin E is there, but it's the only oil that really contains it. Look, what's number 2 is sunflower. So we've got 150 milligrams per 100 grams. Next one is 41. So it's 4 times greater wheat germ oil than anything else. But you'd only get that if you have freshly ground wheat. So you'll get this by having freshly ground wheat. Okay? So the next one down is safflower. Then you've got nuts, nut oils like almonds and hazelnuts, palm oils. Where the hell is soy? No. What do they make vitamin E supplements from? Soy. Why do they make vitamin E from soy? Because it's cheap, okay, and it lasts, okay. But they put it in with other junk oils, and that's why it's rancid. Okay, it's rancid. Just test it. Now I'm going to show you how to test for rancidity, and you will then say, "Whoa."
Do you keep your wheat as a grain in the fridge as well?
No, you can keep the flour. If you don't want to use all your flour, you keep that in the fridge. It'll last you 1 month if you keep it in the fridge. 1 week if you don't, the flour. But it's better to get a mill yourself and make it fresh and then bake it. Okay? That's the best. The longer you leave the wheat as flour, it's going to go off. Okay? So by a week in the room temperature, don't touch it. Okay? Anybody with a good nose will smell. Yeah. Yes. You take old bread and you try it. So, that's not. Okay. Now, vitamin E. Phospholipids of the mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, and membranes possess affinities for the tocopherols, and the vitamin appears to concentrate predominantly in these sites. Now, measurement. Oxidative stability is a measure of an oil or fats resistant to oxidation. Because the process takes place through a chain reaction, the oxidation reaction has a period when it is relatively slow. So, in other words, the tocopherol is taking it up, so the oil doesn't become rancid, only small bits. Before it suddenly speeds up. In other words, once the E is used up, then the oil goes rancid very quickly. The time for this to happen is called the induction time, and it is repeatable under identical conditions. There are a number of ways to measure the progress of the oxidation reaction. One of the most popular methods currently in use is the Rancimat method. The Rancimat method is carried out using an air current at temperatures between 50 and 250 degrees centigrade. Okay, you think you can all do this every day, with your rancid oils? Okay. The volatile oxidation products, largely formic acid, are carried by the air current. Formic acid is a carbon 1. current into the measuring vessel where they're absorbed or dissolved, and the measuring fluid. By continuous measurement of the conductivity of this solution, oxidation curves can be generated. The cusp point of the oxidation curve, the point where a rapid rise in conductivity starts, gives the induction time of the rancidification reaction and can be taken as an indication of the oxidative stability. All very complex, but one simple thing. You just put formic acid on the patient, okay, with the oil. So you put the oil on because the person won't necessarily weaken to a rancid oil, but you put the formic acid on then, and they do. Test them with the formic acid on its own, they're strong. Test them with the oil on its own, they're strong. Put the formic acid on with the oil and just watch them go. That oil is rancid. Okay, very easy, just copy what the technical one is and think, well, I'm going to use that as a biomarker. Okay, if you haven't got, you've got it in the fatty acid kits. If you haven't got that one, just ask and we'll give you it, because there's another substance you want as well. Yeah? Is that a hand up? No? Oh. Okay, so this is a rancid oil. Now here's the unsaturated oil. There's the free radical. The lipid becomes oxidized, more oxygen comes in, and we get peroxyl radical being produced here. Okay, then this goes along and we get lipid peroxidation and the production of aldehydes. And the major aldehyde from peroxidized lipids, rancid fats, is malonaldehyde, malonaldehyde. Okay, now this is in the old pain diagnostic box 2. Okay, now we have this here. We have formic acid, and Jill, you have that margarine. Okay, so let me take our patient back. If you'd like to come back, Christine, and let's see if she's rancid. Okay, just one will do. Right, you put yourself down. So remember, I'm using the left brain, aren't we? It was counting which worried you, wasn't it? Okay. So what we do is we'll use your left brain. Okay. Let's pull this one up to there. Good pull. So if she's high in malonaldehyde, it means she's got rancid oils. Okay? It's the measure, the standard measure for oxidation of lipids. Now, big technical thing really, but it's happening with all of us, unfortunately, in our brains and the oils. Pull. Yep. So she's all right. No, she's all right. She's strong. Okay. Pull. Oh dear. Her right brain doesn't like that. That would have come up later on when we fixed her left brain, but it's showing on her right side. Okay, so she's weak to that. So let's put the oil on. Let's put this is a margarine beginning with F. Okay, which she's very strong to. So you could sell this stuff really good. Okay, let's take that off. Okay, let's put formic acid on to make sure she's not just high in formic acid. Remember, the formic acid is formed by the oxidation, the rancidity. Now we put the two on together. Okay, now you see that oil is rancid. Okay. So if you knew what that oil was made of, you wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. Okay. You take that, that'll get into your brain. You get into all the areas where you use oils. And that, remember, is the neuronal connections are all double bonds. Both phospholipids are unsaturated. Okay? The more you eat of that, the more you'll become like that. You'll end up in a tub yourself. Okay. So, be really very, very careful. Use the formic acid. If you don't have formic acid as a marker already in the fatty acid kits, and if you don't have malonaldehyde, which is in the pain diagnostic box 2, just ask for them. Get those two. Don't go without having those two. Malonaldehyde. It's in pain box 2. You probably got that, Anthony. Here. Malonaldehyde. It's an aldehyde byproduct of rancid fats. It's a standard measurement, laboratory measurement, for lipid peroxidation. And the worrying thing is that practically everybody in this room will awaken to it. And there's only one answer to it. What's the answer? Wheat germ oil. It's vitamin E. Because you want to protect against rancid fats. Remember, we create rancid fats in our body from oxidative processes. So we can't stop it, but we can protect by the vitamin E, which is why nature has put vitamin E in every single plant oil. But if you let that oil go too old and there's no E left in them, then you're just eating oils which are rancid. And they are. And the problem is, commercially, they just put a fragrance in, so you don't smell it. Every oil in the supermarket, unless it's cold pressed, is rancid. Okay? And if it's in a clear bottle, it's probably rancid as well, even if it's cold pressed. As soon as it gets the light in. You should only ever buy oil in a black bottle or a tin. You know, the tins of olive oil are all right because there's no air in there. There's no light and there's very little air. So to protect, once you've opened it, remember, what do you put on the top? 2 drops of water, okay? And put it back in the dark again, and don't put it near the cooker. If you've got an Agar or something, don't put it near that because the heat will make it unstable. Never keep your oil bottles close to anything too hot, like an Agar or Rabum. Okay, we'll save you later on. Remember, it's your other brain, which is your right brain, is getting hard. Okay, and you need that for your thinking process. Okay, so that's rancid fat. So let's go back now. There's a whole thing on that PowerPoint on trans fats, rancid fats, and hydrogenated fats. Right? Those are the 3 major baddies. We'll do all this in the update in September, so we'll do it in detail. But remember, the solution to that, is the protection is vitamin E. So you'll find that, follow the list of the oils which are naturally rich in vitamin E. All right. So nuts. How should you eat nuts? Raw. Yes, you shouldn't have them roasted, of course, but you should crack them in the shell. Soon as a nut comes out of the shell, you've got 7 days. Okay. So peanuts, something like that. When the shell is cracked, the air gets in, obviously, and they're rancid. So you eat rancid oils with the nuts.
So when you buy them in the shop, they are packed up.
Yeah, in the light. Or maybe in the silver foil order, but they're rancid. If you're not sure, run the formic acid test. Okay.
Christmas time is the best time because that's when they sell them in the shop.
Yes, right. You can get them. It's difficult to get, but nuts will last for a long time in their shells. It's nature's sealed the air away, you see, from them. Formic acid is what's in red ant stings, isn't it?
Oh.
Yes, I think that's, if you want to experience formic acid, just put your hand in an ant's nest. So, right, so let's go back to glucose now. So we looked a little bit about oxygen. Now we need the fuel. So if we don't have enough fuel, the brain doesn't work and we get all sorts of symptoms. So the source of fuel for the brain's neuron is exclusively glucose, except the amino acid glutamine can become a fuel when required, but not other amino acids or fatty acids. So in other words, the brain cannot live on fat or protein. Okay? It has to live on glucose and possibly glutamine. Symptoms of low blood sugar. Okay? We're all familiar with symptoms of high blood sugar, but low blood sugar is, the first thing is the neurological, where you use most sugar or energy in the body, is we're going to get tired. So our muscles are tired and our brain is tired. We can't think properly and we don't feel like exercising. We get headaches, especially on waking. Why on waking is because we're low, aren't we? Okay? The reason we haven't eaten for 10 hours or so. We get dizziness, okay, because your brain doesn't work properly. And the areas which are most oxygen hungry and glucose is the cerebellum. And the cerebellum is a small brain, so that's what cerebellum means, but there's more neurons in there than the whole of the cortex, okay? So it's densely packed. That means it means more oxygen and more glucose than any other part. And it's related to our vestibular mechanism, so we feel dizzy when we don't have. We get brain fog, okay? We get memory loss because we can't access because our neurons aren't firing, and we get depression. So this is really important because if you've got hypoglycemia, you just can't get yourself going. You feel depressed, okay? And this is one of the major causes of depression, is low blood sugar, okay? So what should you do about it? We know that blood sugar is regulated by certain hormonal-like substances. Insulin lowers it. So when we have a big sugary meal, in swings the insulin, pumps it into the cell to get your glucose in. But it also says we can't burn that because we've got no Bs and magnesium with it. We'll shunt it into making fats. Okay, so it goes through a different process there and ends up as triglycerides. Okay, so if you have white flour and white sugar, you're more likely to put on fat. Okay, especially if because there's no Bs, there's no magnesium, there's no Bs. Why do you think we've got the obesity problem? Look at the junk. Just look at the diet of somebody who's obese. Okay, you've got to really strip them apart, and it's an education, isn't it? There tend to be people who are not well educated because they're not eating the right foods. Now, you've been educated, you consciously thought about what I'm saying, and you'll all know people who just eat rubbish. You know, they're eating burgers and whatever. And that's, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, providing they have freshly ground wholemeal bread to put it in. Okay. Right, insulin lowers. Glucagon raises it when it's blood down, which is a liver enzyme. Now, adrenaline raises through the adrenal medulla, and we need that very fast when we're in times of emergency. We need a spurt of glucose and energy, and cortisol when we want to do it over a longer period. And cortisol is from the adrenal cortex, and this can do it by gluconeogenesis, so it can start to burn up amino acids and convert those into glucose. Okay, so this is the most common reason. So if a person has hypoglycemia, and you get this because they have those symptoms when they wake up. They're bad when they wake up, and they're bad about 4 o'clock this afternoon. So anybody caught yawning at 4 o'clock this afternoon has probably got hypoglycemia. Usually 2 to 3 hours after a starchy meal. So they have the baked potato, they have bread or whatever it is, and 2 or 3 hours later, immediately it's got into the system there, up goes the insulin, drives it down, and then 2 hours later they've got hypoglycemia. So what happens is most people get a surge of cortisol by about 4 to 5 in the afternoon. Okay? If your adrenals are working, nature does this. It's a rhythm. So you get this big rhythm at 5 o'clock in the morning, so you don't wake up with low blood sugar. That's why we have this high amount. But in the afternoon, you get a little rise, just to stop you having that late afternoon chocolate crave, okay, which is the usual thing, is most go for chocolate or something sweet, maybe a cup of tea with honey in or something like that, okay, to give that push. But it's a sign your adrenals are knackered, okay, because you're not getting the cortisol from your adrenals. You're not boosting out. So by this afternoon, if anybody's yawning, we'll know that they've got hypoglycemia, okay, and that's a sign of lowered adrenals. Test a person with low blood sugar. Do they strengthen to blood sugar? But don't use sucrose. Sucrose is not glucose. We need glucose, and we need proper glucose, not fructose, okay, not corn syrup or anything else. Use the glucose in the kits, because glucose is a single 6-carbon sugar. It has to be pure as the body would use it. I can remember sucrose or table sugar is not. It's 2 molecules of glucose together. The body cannot use sucrose. It has to chop it in half to make 2 molecules of glucose. So if they strengthen glucose, they've got low blood sugar. If they weaken to glucose, they've got high blood sugar, okay? So you're looking at, you know, 2 opposite sort of conditions. So you need to challenge with the different hormone or the glands, but the one you're going to find is, in most people, when they've consistently got this problem, is they've got low adrenal cortical function, and which means low cortisol. So they're not producing the cortisol. Now, here's how we make cortisol in the steroid hormone chart. You remember this one? So we make it from cholesterol, and then we make pregnenolone, and usually we'll go along this route, and down here, hydroxyprogesterone, down to cortisol. But we could also do this route down, so cortisol. Okay. So we need a lot of different nutrients here. NADH, which is B3, we need iron, we need oxygen, okay? So in comes our oxygen. And down here, we need a bit of B5. Sometimes we can take it a bit of route that way. But what is the major cause of hypoadrenia? No, not lack of oxygen. It may be lack of the right nutrients to get it to go, but the reason the adrenal glands themselves are not recovering is a lack of protein. Lack of amino acid. The body can't recover. Just like Pottinger's cats. They can't recover. They need protein. Okay? That's why they respond to the tissue extract. Right? I'm not a great lover of tissue extract, but if you don't love tissue extracts, that's fine. Use potato water, use rye, and use sesame seeds, and use selected nuts. You can challenge for which nuts are good and so on. They need protein. Okay? They haven't got the building blocks. Why have they not got the building blocks? Because they cook the proteins, okay? They cook the lot. And what is the precursor you'll see to adrenaline hormones, or that, is all tyrosine, okay? And these are all sort of proteins which can be affected in amino acids by the cooking process, okay? Now, steroid hormones are made from cholesterol. The old way of treating people with hypoadrenia was to give them cholesterol. So it builds it out. You can imagine people on statin drugs who are driven down to 4 and even 3 they're now talking. I think even a fraction below that, aren't they? They must have virtually no cholesterol in them to make other things which their body needs, the phospholipid structures and the steroid hormones. So the women, their menstrual cycles stop and all sorts of really serious problems can develop by driving it too low, okay? Equally, too high can be bad and too low can be too bad. So it's finding the optimal for that person. But with hypoadrenia, they've usually actually got low cholesterol. Now, do you know what they used to get the cholesterol from to give to people to build the cholesterol up? Lanolin. So you used to rub people with lanolin cream. Bathe them in lanolin cream when they got hypoadrenia. It's pure cholesterol. The only reason we use lanolin these days is to get the vitamin D out because it's a rich source of vitamin D. But it was lanolin. So you remember the old lanolin? Oh, it was sticky, wasn't it? Sticky stuff. And pure cholesterol. And it gives them the food to get the adrenals going. But they need the protein. So the source of the protein, as I say, eating cooked protein won't do it. It has to be raw protein to get the amino acids so they're not glycosylated. Particularly cooking protein with sugar. Okay, remember that's the key bit. So avoid caffeine because that will give you a quick fix. Eat little and often, particularly of complex carbohydrates. So no white flour, white sugar, but go for the whole meal with the protein. Avoid caffeine and get plenty of rest and sleep. And take adrenal supplements. Most of those are going to be things like vitamin C, very, very important for adrenal function, and the Bs. Okay, that's good. So remember, I won't do the stimulation, the third part. Remember the 3 things the brain needs is oxygen, glucose, and stimulation. Stimulation is pretty obvious, you need to get out there and exercise a bit more. Okay, so the chemistry of the emotions. Okay, so before anything else, before someone comes in there anxious or depressed, it may be nothing to do with their thinking. It could be purely that they haven't got enough oxygen up there, they've got hypoglycemia. These are things we overlook, aren't they? Fundamentals, because you get too involved with the symptom of the patient. Sometimes you've got to step back and say, let's do all the tests, go through the tests, and then you discover what the body needs, what the person needs, and you think, now I can see why they got the symptoms. Okay? So false emotions are caused by an imbalance in the neurotransmitters. So in other words, these are emotional problems that come out as emotions, but are not caused by their way of thinking. Okay? They create the way of thinking. They get depressed because they're deficient or toxic. These emotions have no identifiable cause. Everything's okay in their life, but they feel sad. You just feel a low level of the blues, hopelessness, or the opposite, anxiety. You have been unsuccessful in resolving depression, anxiety, sadness, even with years of therapy and counselling. Okay, these people go along and have counselling, all sorts of things, and they never really make that big breakthrough. They find all about the problems they had in childhood, but they've still got the problems. You have had problems sleeping through the night, okay, so brain chemicals are too active. When deficient in specific neurotransmitters, a number of emotional symptoms are likely. Now, the most common neurotransmitters to be out of balance with emotional problems is serotonin. And we know that because of the selective serotonin uptake inhibitors, can lead to depression, aggressiveness, anxiety, panic attacks, food and alcohol cravings, irritability, and insomnia. So it's interesting here because serotonin I always call the gin of the neurotransmitters, and that if you're deficient, you have a gin and you feel better. But when you've had too many gins, you feel depressed again. Okay? It pushes you over the top. And so too much serotonin, too little. Serotonin is not an upper. It's a modulator. It brings you up to a level. Okay? So if you're low in serotonin, you feel down. But when you have things that build your serotonin, you feel normal. Okay? You don't get a high. If you have high serotonin, you get anxious and go down the other side. All right? So it's a modulator, serotonin. Dopamine includes low dopamine depression, stress, mental exhaustion, fatigue, low sex drive, and low motivation. Dopamine is an upper. The surge that you get when you feel really excited about something, when Murray wins next Saturday, or Sunday, whenever, okay? We'll all get a surge of dopamine, just like we did during the Olympics, okay? However, if Murray doesn't get to that point, or he gets to the finals and loses, Murray will experience low serotonin, okay? So low serotonin brings sadness on, okay? And dopamine brings in elation. And you don't actually have to watch it. It's like the gambler. The gambler doesn't need to actually win or lose. It's the playing. They don't care whether they win or lose often, they'll still just spend the money. It's the thrill of it, okay? So you don't have to play the football match. You can watch the football match and still get the same effect, okay? So we should be able to do it with our thinking about happy things. Things that give us a surge will help us pick us up, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Noradrenaline have been linked, low noradrenaline to depression. Adrenaline or noradrenaline is important for alertness, keeps us awake as we know, concentration and attention. There's lots of adrenergic neurons which are there, not just when we're under stress, but to keep us awake, you know. And GABA, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, can lead to feelings of anxiety because that's like the brake. So we haven't got enough inhibition. And if we haven't got enough inhibition, we get anxious, okay? So a deficiency of inhibition will lead to anxiety.